that in one of his murals, or in one of his paintings, Ed did, and that particular type of ship, of which there were many in that style. This is what it looks like in the winter time. This is probably like 2 days ago, but like I said, you know, the winters are very, very bitter and cold, and I can see why Ed enjoyed living in Rock Hill for its beautiful, mild climate, proximity to the sea, as well as the proximity to the mountains. Here's what those ships looked like in that bay, and one of those great iron towers in the background that used to be utilized for offloading the cargo. These ships would be ocean-going ships that would come up and down the St. Lawrence Seaway. You can go from Superior, Duluth, in Minnesota, Wisconsin, on the extreme western part, and take the Great Lakes all the way through by channels and canals and docks and constructions all the way to the sea through the lock system. It is feasible, and that's what these ships did. Remember, all these ships, you had to be out by the middle of November because the gales of November come early, and these ships would crack in half if they were caught between two gigantic waves, not unlike the great seagoing vessels that we have in today's modern world. There you see the snow in the foreground. Here, this is the Edmund Fitzgerald. Ed gives us a view of it, and he must have had a real personal connection with these, not only the ship's captains, but the owners of the ships. Because to go up on board ship like this, I was never allowed to do it myself, is a particular view. Now, someone asked me earlier, they said, do you know if Ed worked from reference photographs? And I believe he probably did use reference photographs, but many times he went to the actual site to draw it. You see the beautiful horizontal, the sense of delineation, all very precisely laid out and precisely executed in a manner that's extremely not only graphic, but aesthetically very pleasing. Not the whole ship, but a detail of the ship. Here are some of the tugs that are still found in the Milwaukee harbor there on Jones Island. And though Ed's tugboats are a little bit earlier than these modern ones, you get the same idea. Here are two of his tugboats. They are in dry dock. We all know what a dry dock is when the ship is taken up. But what I find interesting is how Ed has shown this strong curvilinear quality to the hull of the ship, the rear with the propeller, and then the side view of the ship. I would kindly note that you read the label pertaining to this particular work of art when you have the pleasure of seeing the exhibition, the view of these two tugboats in the exhibition. Here's some of those modern ships that the type that Ed glorified in his work. Another view of one of the ore carriers. These big plates in the front, they actually slide back, and then these huge gigantic cranes come in and take the cargo and bring them up. Now all of that, these great towers, these great steel towers, all of that's been torn down because now there are portable cranes that simply do the same type of work. But again, you have Ed's consummate interest in design, layout, precision, and readability to the works of art. This is the view of the textile mills here in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And Ed's very antiseptic view of that building, which by the time Ed got here, it was in the process of closing, but he chose to show it as not only the interest in light and dark and different colorations and the geometry of it, but in a very cleaned up appearance. Here is another view of our Wisconsin winters and the winters that Ed glorified. Remember, in the winter time, because of the bitter cold, You have cabin fever. A lot of time is spent indoors in the winter, where here in the wintertime you can still go outside, but there a lot of people will turn to not only their art and their art making processes, as well as other interior crafts and activities that, because you simply cannot function out of doors. Here's the view of the gravel crusher and Ed's geometric study of not only the gravel crusher, which is the structure right here in the front. Again, this is probably Jones Island, but this crane and this large tower for offloading the cargo. And an interesting and curious phenomena about this is that, and you still see it today, the snow is always white and the coal is always black. And this particular image, like those scenes that you see with your own eyes, are extremely monochromatic. Now in Milwaukee is a company called Bucyrus. And Bucyrus made cranes, and they still make cranes today. But they're steam cranes, and this is one of them, were the steam cranes that did what in American enterprise and engineering in the early part of the 20th century? Any idea? These are the steam cranes that built the Panama Canal. They were made in Milwaukee and shipped to Panama to dig the ditch between the seas. Here's one of his interior views. And like Diego Rivera, who used to say, the Americans are some of the world's worst artists, but they are their best art. The best art in America are the machines. When Diego Rivera painted the great murals at the Detroit Institute of Art, also in the 30s, he spent time doing what? He spent time in the River Rouge plant watching the automobiles being assembled at the Henry Ford plant. He loved it. I had the privilege many years ago of working on some Diego Rivera murals, and again, like Ed Lewandowski, Ed was a consummate, and Diego Rivera, they were consummate craftsmen in their ability to conceptualize, to lay out in a very beautiful way their compositions, and to work them in an academic manner to a pleasing aesthetic. And as well, in this one, you look at it and you are at first perplexed by what is this machine, right? It's part of a huge blast furnace for one of these industries that he was allowed to go into. And he had personal contacts with many industrialists who allowed him to go into their factories and draw, including this one, the Kearney and Trecker milling machines company, where Ed said he enjoyed looking at, quote, airplanes, boats, conveyor belts, suction fans, locomotives, and all manner of industrial machines. At Kearney and Trecker, he was able to go in and actually draw and sketch and take photographs in this industrial setting. I would highly recommend it for any of you who wish to get their hands in the clay of which the bricks are made in understanding art. All art does not come from sitting in Starbucks or Earth Fair or in the studio. Here's one of Ed's beautiful drawings in pencil and charcoal. And again, he took something as simple as these industrial isolators or insulators for electricity and glorified it in a beautiful and interesting design. This large mural, which you have on display here in the gallery, alludes to not only the industrial environment at the, I've forgotten the name of this company. I'm so sorry. I've got it written down somewhere. It was in Milwaukee there. I might come across it in a minute. Anyway, the essence of it is that you see these various professions combined.